Welcome to Muted in Medicine, the podcast where we break the silence on the untold stories and pressing issues within the healthcare professional. Join us as we dive deep into topics that often linger in the shadows of medical corridors and are not discussed in conferences, meetings, social gatherings, and in the hallways. They are often hiding. From navigating errors and facing litigation to the often overlooked realm of mental health among healthcare professionals. Through candid conversations and storytelling, we aim to amplify the voices and shed light on challenges that resonate across the medical landscape. So grab your stethoscope and a cup of coffee and tune in as we uncover the layers of complexity in the world of healthcare that are so muted yet so profoundly impactful.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Muted in Medicine, the podcast where we break the silence on untold stories in healthcare. My name is Saba Fatima, and I'm your host for this podcast. I'm a pediatrician with a passion for helping healthcare professionals facing secondary trauma at work in healthcare, which often they're unprepared to face. Today, we're talking about imposter syndrome. Imposter syndrome, despite how accomplished you are, how hard you've worked, or how many lives you've impacted, can whisper, you are not enough. And in medicine, where perfectionism is the norm and vulnerability is rare, those whispers can grow deafening. A national survey found that 1 in 4 physicians report experiencing frequent or intense imposter feelings. And it doesn't just stay in the mind. Those feelings are closely linked to burnout, depression, and even suicidal ideation. In a profession where lives are on the line, we rarely pause to acknowledge the quiet unraveling that happens within our own. Today, we're exploring how imposter syndrome shows up in healthcare, how identity, training, and culture quietly erode our sense of belonging. Whether you're early in your training or decades into your career, this episode is a reminder you're not alone. We're joined today by Aashi Arora, a seasoned executive leader with over 20 years of experience in healthcare administration and leadership across both public and private sectors. As the founder and principal of iRISE Executive Coaching, she helps healthcare professionals and leaders strengthen their emotional intelligence, confidence, and resilience. Aashi is a sought-after speaker on leadership and imposter syndrome, and her work empowers physicians to navigate self-doubt and build sustainable success. Aashi, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Saba. It's great to be here.
We ask everybody when we start the podcast, what is bringing you joy in the work you're doing today, or just joy in general?
Oh, I love that. It's so funny because I recently posted this on LinkedIn about finding my happy place and reflecting on a time where I didn't have that happy place, which we'll, I'm sure, get into a little bit later. And it's at Disneyland, going with my husband. I'm fortunate to be living in Southern California, not too far away. And I'm married to a physician, a very busy gastroenterologist. So I was really happy when he surprised me with like, hey, let's get Disney passes. And so that is our happy place. We go together often, and it brings me a lot of joy.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, it was busy this time of the year. Yeah.
Oh, yes. It's always busy. That's why I find myself so fortunate that I can have passes and go and not feel like I need to go the whole day to maximize the amount of time with how much, you spend on a regular ticket. So when we go for like 3-4 hours.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you said your husband is a physician. You're not a physician yourself. Can you tell us a bit about your background and how you came to focus on coaching healthcare professionals and what drew your interest into it?
Yeah, so I've been in healthcare, I like to say my entire life. I'm the daughter of 2 physicians. My father, both my parents immigrated here in the 70s. They did their training in India and then had to retrain, of course, when they came here and established themselves. I worked in their clinics in high school and took an interest early on in the business side, especially at a time when managed care was just starting to make its way. into medicine and the challenges that came with that. And so I went on in college to do still a degree, undergrad degree in biology, but then I did my master's in healthcare administration and started at a very young age getting into management and kind of worked my way up into various C-suite roles in healthcare, always working around physicians. And that was, I think, a big key to my success was because I was so used to having been in a physician family. I was very comfortable with being kind of the in-between of executive leaders, especially early on in my career and then later becoming one, and being able to speak the language and understand the physician experience. And so I was often very much trusted by physicians. I always say all physicians are leaders, but all the way from the medical student level all the way up until, senior attending. And found that during my executive leadership career, especially one of the later parts where I was heavily into operations, there was this huge gap of understanding of the physician experience. And I was seeing, or at least acknowledging and becoming more and more aware later on in my career of how much burnout was happening.
Yeah.
And there weren't enough resources devoted to supporting physicians and understanding and what was happening. So I'll get to coaching. So I very early on loved teaching and mentoring in my career. And I even did some basic mediation because I was seeing a lot of conflict in the workplace and often physicians being kind of at the heart of that conflict, right? And sadly, often blamed for a lot of the conflict as well. And I'm like, there's got to be a better way. I've grown up with physicians. I have a lot of physicians in my family. I can't imagine that it's always the physician's fault.
Yeah.
And so employed basic mediation later on as I became in executive leadership roles, started doing a lot of leadership coaching and started recommending in the environments I was working in, why don't we bring in more coaching to individual physicians and to some of these teams that are struggling with conflict? And often the pushback I was getting was that, oh, no, in healthcare, we only give coaches to people who are disruptive and really a problem instead of looking at it from a leadership development perspective. Okay. And then when we would get coaches in, and not to discredit my therapeutic colleagues, because remember, coaching comes from the world of mental health and from psychology. But what was happening is a lot of the physicians I was even trying to hire coaches for, the teams I was trying to hire coaches for, were saying, these people don't understand our experience. They've never experienced what it's like to work here.
Yeah.
And Saba, I found myself starting to internally coach a lot, especially in the last 5 years of being in executive leadership. And literally, I would come to my office and I'd have a line of people outside and I'm like, what's happening? They're like, oh, we have to get in and talk to you about this problem. Or I'm struggling in my career, or I'm unhappy, or this or that. I'm having this fight with somebody else. And at one point, the chair of one of the departments said, you've got to stop being like hen or mother goose to these faculty or these physicians. And I'm like, but where else do they turn to? We're not providing them enough of the resources and the support. And so 2019 came. It was a big challenging year in my personal life. My 12-year-old daughter was hospitalized with MRSA. She ended up in the ICU. Thankfully, she's fine. But a few months after that, and with MRSA, it doesn't always go away. So you're back and forth and trying to eliminate it. It takes usually about 6 months. And then my father got a stroke. And, when you are juggling a lot of balls in the air in your personal life, your professional life, all these facets of your what I like to call the wheel of life, it started showcasing to me that I can't work these number of hours in my career and I need to pick a lane. And, trying to juggle the operational executive responsibilities along with trying to also do this internal coaching, like I needed to pick a lane. And I found so much more joy and pleasure in helping people find the joy that they were missing in their careers
Yeah.
and often also in their lives. And so I made a bold move, in 2019, and I quit my executive career and decided to start my own business. And that's where iRISE Executive Coaching was formed. And so now what I do is I guide healthcare professionals, especially physicians, and finding that joy and satisfaction that they're missing in their careers. And I also work with organizations who say, hey, we can't work with this person, but we can't work without them. Can you help them? And I'm like, yes, I can, because I understand their experience in a way that can help them translate better that experience and their needs for support in the workplace so that they can be better leaders and better people to work around.
Yeah. And I understand you never wanted to become a physician yourself.
Yeah. So that part of the story was I was in a 7-year biomed program.
Okay.
The parents did. Um, it was kind of understood, right? It was
Yeah.
understood that I would do medicine. But we started just something as simple as like vertebrae anatomy in my freshman year, and I kept passing out in my
Oh.
class, and I was like, "What's going on here?" And I had done some dissections, animal dissections, in high school biology class, but later on, I figured out that needles, blood, just did not work well with me.
Sure.
And the idea of, getting a little bit too up close and personal with a patient, it just wasn't appealing. So I transitioned out of that program and finished my undergrad degree and went on to do healthcare administration, thankfully.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Yeah, I figured for parents of immigrants who are doctors, that's kind of a unsaid thing that you're going to be a doctor. Um, I heard one of your talks on imposter syndrome in the past, and I was curious, have you seen imposter syndrome in people around you? What drew you to the topic of imposter syndrome? So being a healthcare executive, you were talking to a lot of people, it sounds like, unofficially. Was that something you saw around you?
Yeah, absolutely. And the way I clued into that awareness early on is because I um, I'm like, how much time do we have for this podcast? I hope these stories are what your listeners are tuning into, and I
Yeah.
hope they find it helpful. So I have a story with this one as well, which is usually how I start my talks as well, is identifying my own imposter syndrome, which actually
Mhm.
wasn't identified directly by me. It was identified by another leader, and gratefully so. So over now 10 years ago, maybe 12 years ago, I was I was the chief administrative officer of a very large
Mhm.
department, and with a kind of a dual reporting relationship. And up until that point, I had gotten outstanding performance evaluations, and unfortunately, not very critical ones. So, not really telling me what I was doing well and what I could do better. It was just like, oh, yeah, you're wonderful. Everything's great, et cetera, et cetera. So, I was about to get one of those evaluations again. And so the person I indirectly reported to actually did my evaluation. She was the one that was working often with me. And then the chair who I reported to said, wait, I want to do this properly. And he went on to attempt to give me some feedback, but gave a lot of feedback, a lot of feedback
Mm.
that I wasn't used to. And he wasn't accustomed to probably giving it in the best way possible. And I went home that night and felt like a complete failure.
Mm.
Complete failure. I did not get out of bed the next day. I had never called in sick without running like 103 fever. Like it wasn't like me to do that. Or unless one of my kids was running like an excessive fever that I had to keep them home. So I literally could not get out of bed the next day. I felt so much shame, so much unworthiness. And I really felt like, oh my gosh, someone has finally discovered that I suck at this. All my worst fears have come true. I am terrible at this. I should not be working. And Saba, I wrote my resignation letter and I sent it that night.
Mm.
I resigned. I resigned after a evaluation that was not done well, yet at the same time also one that I could not handle.
Yeah.
And the following day after that, a executive leader in a different area who knew the chair well took me out and handed me Sheryl Sandberg's book, Lean In. And she said, I want you to read a certain section in here on
Mhm.
imposter syndrome. And so I spent the rest of the weekend reading the book, and it was like, oh my gosh, this is exactly me. Like, here I've had all of these successes. I've always felt that I was lucky instead of
Mhm.
attributing it to skill. Because and I'm sure we'll get into this a little bit more. Nobody looked like me in leadership. A woman and a woman of color. I was often in boardrooms where it was all men and it was often white men. Like nobody looked like me. And so it was like me being the only person at the table, a lot like what Sheryl Sandberg was describing. And so I often felt like I wasn't supposed to be there. And, to your question earlier too about wanting to become a doctor, I often felt like I somehow, failed my parents, even though they were always very supportive of me and my choices. There were times where I felt like I shouldn't be doing this. And then also like culturally, I'm the youngest person here. I mean, I was managing people at 22.
Yeah.
And so it also felt like I'm getting too far ahead, like this doesn't make sense, and so all of these imposter like feelings. So to answer your earlier question in this long story, drawn out story, I did by the way go back to rescind my resignation and went on to have a great career, but really focused in on, okay, I need to learn about imposter syndrome and I need to figure out how to work through this. And I need to help others through it because once I saw the awareness in myself, I started seeing it all around me. And I
Mhm.
often tell people who may not be working in healthcare or work in healthcare, but maybe in different professions, they go, why would you want to work with physicians? They're narcissists. And I often say to them, I said, no, 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 no. What you think might be narcissistic behavior is actually disguised imposter syndrome. I know that you said 1 in 4 was your stat. I would say I was seeing it more on the levels of 8 and 10. And even the most senior professors who just did not want to be exposed for what they thought they didn't know. And so very, very pervasive. Saw a lot of it, and it was my calling. And I found even early on in my business when I launched, when I was posting about imposter syndrome, when I was talking to people about imposter syndrome, those are the type of clients that were drawn in and said, I need more help with this. Can you help me? I'm like, yeah, absolutely. And I've seen transformative results, really, because once you grab an awareness to it and then you start doing something about it, it's life changing.
Yeah. And you talked about self awareness, right? Just recognizing it within yourself. So, because of your work in it, I kind of want you to kind of spell it out if you can. What does it feel like? Imposter syndrome in general. What feelings do we feel? And why is healthcare more prone to it? So it was interesting you said that everybody thinks or somebody thought healthcare providers are narcissists. And that's really so different from our personal experience, me, especially if I talk about my own experience as well. So why are we more prone to it and what does it feel like?
Yeah, yeah. So let me start with the feelings around imposter syndrome. So it feels like a person feels like they're a fake or a phony. And they're in this constant or often fear that someone will discover they're not as
Hmm.
great as everyone thinks that they are.
Yeah.
And they will hook on to one person saying something to them versus the 10 or 20 or 100 that say how wonderful they are. And they are either looking for that recognition or they are trying to, get more accolades or awards, but it doesn't matter how many they get, they still have that sinking feeling that I am not that great. I am not worthy. And yeah, I mean, there's lack of self-confidence, there's lack of self-esteem. And I think that the most important thing, though, to understand about it is it's not just something, and Harvard Business Review had a great article on this, and it was more focused on women because we've seen in the data that women tend to feel it more than men, although we see the more severe cases in men. Typically, probably because they probably can't feel like they can talk to anyone about it, whereas women tend to talk a little bit more about emotionally how they're feeling, and so they may get more of that support around it. But anyways, the Harvard Business Review article was around stop telling women they have imposter syndrome, which basically was saying that we blame people almost for having it and just say like, oh, just be more confident, get thicker skin, do this, do that. When really a small portion of it is really the internal, but most of the imposter-like feelings are because of external triggers. It's the environments you work in, it's the culture you come from, it's how you were raised, it's American society at large, especially in these times right now. So there are a lot of factors that contribute to why someone has those feelings of imposter syndrome. And so I really try to impart on people like, hey, it's not your fault you feel like an imposter,
Mm.
right? And there's a lot of other factors that are contributing to this. However, it's very difficult to make changes around you. The first change is within yourself, right? So be aware to it, but also be understanding and kind to yourself around it.
Yeah.
So that's kind of in a nutshell about imposter syndrome. How it used to show up for me was I would quiet my voice. I felt like my voice was not good enough to speak up. And I think that a bit of that comes culturally, right? Like we don't speak up against elders, we don't look at them in the eye. You know, when I'm speaking from a South Asian experience, we wait until spoken to, we don't interrupt. And
Yeah.
so now imagine I'm in a boardroom with a lot of dominant voices.
Sure.
How do I get my voice noticed if I have this, this cultural belief system that's holding me back? So it took
Mm.
me time to really work on that. And I have a number of strategies that I used for it. But anyways, that's how it used to show up for me, where I felt not confident enough to speak.
Mhm.
And because unless I really thought it was absolutely perfect. So getting to, let me pause there and let me ask it back to you about, before we get into why in healthcare, would you like to add anything, or even from your own experience, if you don't mind me asking,
Yeah.
about how imposter syndrome has shown up or feels like to you?
Yeah, I was kind of reflecting on that. As you were talking, I was kind of thinking about my own experience as well, because that question was in my mind: is it external versus internal? Because, as you said, it could be more external. I was thinking, my internal imposter was saying, "Why did I feel it more than others?"
Yeah, of
In the
course.
same room. So I was kind of thinking about it because I don't know if people are good at masking, but I don't see it so much so in other people. And so to your point about the cultural thing, I was like, maybe was it cultural? Maybe the way I was brought up, like, is that why I'm seeing it more in myself, or is it healthcare? I am asking myself these questions, but yes, I did feel a lot of uh, imposter syndrome, and I still do. And uh, so I'm a high achiever, like good grades,
Yeah.
everything good, good, good. And then still I feel like, it's hard to make my voice count. It's hard to speak up. I always feel like I'm not good enough. So yeah, those feelings have come up. And yeah, I got to reflect. I was going to ask you, why do some people feel it more than others? Then, like there has to be something internal, you think, or is just how the external factors influence us over time?
Yeah, I mean, this is a really complicated question because I think it's hard to draw on one reason as to, right, why some
Yeah.
people have it more than others. There's a book called The Confidence Code that talks all about research around the confidence gene and how
Mm.
people high in the confidence gene may not feel as much imposter syndrome. There's others around positive parenting, and maybe we'll see it less in Generation Z. Who knows?
Yeah.
But I still think medicine a bit the way training is and the way medicine environments are, especially in the US.
Yeah.
I can't really speak to other areas of the world because I haven't researched it or experienced it enough. But in the US, I would say there's definitely a self-selective process, and I'll get into a little bit more about that, why I think so, in medicine for high amounts of imposter syndrome. So let's get to what you just mentioned about being a high achiever. So I'm what's called a strengths practitioner. The Gallup organization has what's called the Clifton Strengths Assessment. It's a behavioral assessment
Mhm.
which gives you insight into what your top strengths are. And those themes help you understand your natural leadership style and your natural behavioral patterns.
Mm.
And a theme that we have seen time and time again, especially in physicians, is this achiever strength.
Mm.
And so I'm guessing, Saba, if we were to do your Clifton Strengths assessment, I don't know if you've done it before or not, achiever probably is in your dominant strengths.
Mhm.
And the thing with achiever is it's what got you to be able to get into medicine, right? Medicine is highly, highly competitive. You had to be a top achiever in elementary school, in high school, in college, and then you get to medical school and you're full of high achievers. So how do you set yourself apart? How do you go for that competitive residency? Like it never stops, right? You never
Yeah.
stop studying. You never stop taking tests. You never stop learning. And so that achiever strength
Mhm.
has some potential blind spots with it too, because too
Mm.
much of a good thing can create some of those blind spots. And people high in the achiever strength are natural perfectionists.
Mm.
And the problem with perfection is when you're in school, you can figure out what perfection is, right? 100% on a test or, 100 marks out of 100. And yet when you get into actual training and you're working in medicine, now how do you measure perfection?
Mhm.
And what happens for most physicians is they're not measuring perfection, right? Even if you get great clinical outcomes with your patient,
Sure.
it may not still be the best outcome you were looking for because we haven't always figured out what is the best, what is that perfection. And so
Right.
now you throw physicians not only in, patient making decisions, but now something that medical school doesn't still, I think, train enough for is the administrative responsibilities that are put on physicians. It's enormous.
Yeah.
And so now you're dealing with administrative personnel, you're dealing with other people, you haven't measured perfectionism, and sometimes you're asked to lead in different groups, like whether it's like quality groups or looking at new type of protocols or cost cutting measures or, revenue enhancing measures and whatever else, whatever committee you're being put on. And now you're like, wait, I don't know how to perform here. I haven't gotten the training. I don't understand how to measure perfection. And so, yeah, no wonder you're going to feel like you're not meant to be there.
Mhm.
So you're thrown into environments where everyone's a top achiever, and then you're thrown into environments you don't get adequately trained for. You're told you're a leader, but you haven't really been given any kind of team leadership development skills. You're thrown into businesses, whether you work for a large organization or a private practice, doesn't matter. You're just expected to have business acumen, but you haven't gotten any training for it. And you're working like 70, 80 hours a week all the time. Like, so it's the perfect storm for creating those imposter feelings.
Yeah. And something you said, it kind of makes sense because you can measure it like anyhow. Like once you go into practice, like there's no way to measure or give back to you. And kind of keying back to what you said earlier, you're looking for validation, recognition, but somehow that's not enough. Does imposter syndrome feed off validation? Like, does that help, you think, or no?
I think it does. It helps. It's just that it's accepting that validation and appreciation is real. And
Yeah.
so the other challenge with perfectionism is, and I'll give you this example. I had a physician leader that I worked with, a vice chair. He said, I hardly give anything or anyone a 5 out of 5 when I'm doing evaluations. And I'm like, why is that? And he's like, because that would be perfect and they wouldn't be learning anything more.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, okay, I understand your perspective. However, the person reading that is probably not going to understand that. They're going to feel like they failed.
Yeah.
And so can we find a way to balance that a little bit differently? And by the way, as I started getting to know him better, I'm like, what does that say about yourself? When do you rate yourself a 5 out of 5 on certain things? And it was rare. It was rare that he rated himself a 5 out of 5. And over time, we figured out he had imposter syndrome too. And so what I'm getting to with that is that oftentimes in medical environments too, we're not giving that kind of praise, right?
Yeah.
To our trainees, to even our attendings. And we're not giving it to them, they're not giving it to themselves, and it's just this whole cycle of no one giving praise and appreciation. When we know that research shows that if, and I'm talking about the Gallup research and workplace analytics, and they've got millions of data points to back this up, that in order for environments to have high productivity, you need high staff engagement. And in order to have high staff engagement, one of the major factors in staff engagement is people getting praised and recognized for their work.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so physicians aren't getting recognized. They're not recognizing others. And this is the loop we're in.
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. I guess we got to pay an attention to that. And, just a reminder for all the leaders and not even leaders, just to each other as well, to our colleagues and peers, that recognition can be given. You said women are more prone to it. Is there a reason why, or do other factors like gender or ethnicity, they play a role in imposter
Yeah.
syndrome?
So the research shows that women deal with imposter syndrome at much higher rates than men do, and that women of color are definitely the group that feel it the most. Why it is, that could be a topic for a whole other show on gender and race and challenges and environments that, but basically the research shows that high amounts of bias in different environments often afflict women more than men, and often afflict women of color or people of color than people not of color. And so you see more higher amounts of imposter syndrome kind of directly correlated to that.
Okay. What are so I guess trying to see some strategies and tools that you give to your clients and people, I think trying to get on the solution part of it to combat imposter syndrome.
Yeah. So to start, and I know this might sound a little gloomy, but it's not, I feel like once you have imposter syndrome, it never completely goes away. But I say that because I think it's an acceptance. So you're not, again, putting this more back on yourself, which is, why can't I just get rid of this? Why do I have these voices in my head? Why do I feel this way? And so I often tell people, look at it as this little monster on your shoulder, and it's often there because it's telling you something. It's something from your childhood. And I don't want to go too far into psychology, but really it is. It's coming from, a lot of it is coming from something in your childhood that's there, that is also trying to tell you something. Because ultimately what the imposter voice is doing is it's trying to protect you. Trying to protect you. It's calling out fears. It's calling out different things because it's trying to, like you're muted in medicine, it's trying to mute you. And it's muting you because it wants to protect you. So it needs attention. So one strategy is to figure out what is triggering its voice to be so loud in whatever situation you're in or set of situations you're in. So like talking to it as if it's almost like a child and you're the mature adult. And this is, I know, a therapeutic technique that people all often, psychologists often and therapists look to. But it's incredibly effective because you're now not making it such a big part of who you are, right? Because it's something controllable. It's like feeling like you can control this. You just need to understand it and give it time to understand. So that
Mm.
does take a lot of reflective time to sit
Mm.
with yourself and understand it. So what are other ways to do that is talking to it, journaling about it, drawing what it looks like, visualizing,
Mm.
conversation with it. And then when you're talking to it, maybe starting off with if trying to understand where it's triggering from is too much, maybe starting off something lighter and smaller, which is negating what it's trying to tell you. And
Mm.
so how do you negate it? How do you prove to it that, hey, I'm not a fake or a phony, and here's my proof? Well, my proof is thinking about all of your, what I like to call brag booking. Because I often tell my clients, like, hey, you're never going to become arrogant. That's just not possible. And, the other area or another reason why we see a lot of imposters in medicine, or a lot of people who feel like imposters in medicine, is because medicine self selects for this value of humility, right? This value of care, wanting to do for others, give ourselves completely to take care of others. And so excessive humility feels often like imposter syndrome as well.
Mm.
And so that's why I never think, and I know I see this time and time again, that somebody who has these imposter like feelings is going to ever feel like completely arrogant. So I said, you need to call it a brag book, because that's what I need you to be doing. I need you to be writing out everything that you can brag about yourself. I need you to ask the people you care about to tell you, what is so great about you. I need you to take the strengths assessment and understand what your strengths are so we can constantly talk about them. I need you to really highlight these achievements and accomplishments so that when that imposter voice gets loud, you go, wait a minute, I got this proof. When patients send you letters or say comments to you, stick them in a file. When someone you love says something great, stick it in a file. When a coworker says something great, stick it in a file. When you are really proud of, and don't say that, oh, because I didn't get 100% on my board exams, I'm not proud. No, no, no. You got to where you are. So be proud of your board exam scores, because no one would have even looked at you if they weren't that stellar.
Mhm.
So all of these things, right? Like really to focus your energy on negating that voice are really, really important. And then there's a lot of other strategies as well. Should we keep going?
Sure. Yeah. No, I think this part is important. So yeah.
Yeah. So I have actually this bucket of like 15 strategies, I like to call it. And so I'll just go over a few more. So the brag booking is really important, having those conversations with that imposter voice, thinking about what it says to you. Would you say that to your best friend? I mean, I don't know if you've experienced this, Saba, but I'm like, wow, I've thought about things in the past I've thought about myself, and I'm like, I would never say that to someone else. Why
Yeah.
do I think it's okay to say, to hear it in myself, right? So it's
Yeah.
like standing in front of a mirror and going, am I really listening? Am I really agreeing with what this is saying? Would I
Yeah.
really say it to someone else like this?
Hmm.
And if I wouldn't say it like this, what would I say? And again, that goes back to what is it? What fear is at the heart of it that it's trying to warn you about, that it's trying to protect you from?
Yeah.
And so what would you say to your daughter? I mean, a lot of these techniques I've learned is also thinking about, I'm raising two daughters. I mean, they're older now, but I feel sometimes I still have to tap into some of those techniques and come back to it to ensure that they don't feel like imposters, especially with my older one being a pre-med student. And
Yeah.
so thinking about, like, how would I explain this fear or talk about this fear to someone else is another strategy.
Yeah.
Um, let me pause there and see if you have any reflections on some of these things I've brought up.
Yeah. And I have to tell you, I heard about the brag book from you in that seminar that I heard, and I made it. So it was a really helpful technique.
Oh,
And
that's great to
and that
hear.
was years ago, like years ago. But I think it's a great technique. Everyone should do it. But I was just thinking, it somehow feels uncomfortable. And that maybe goes on with the humility to talk about your achievements just a little bit. And sometimes when you're doing, um, like the board exam or the things that you talked about, the imposter in us is saying, that's what everybody else is,
Yeah.
that's like an expectation. That's no big deal. So just trying to fight some of those feelings off. But yeah, I agree to the point that sometimes just talking about yourself doesn't feel comfortable. And that may be because of that humility thing that you talked about as physicians or healthcare, anyone who works in healthcare. So I don't know if you ever saw that come up, like talking about your achievements is not the most comfortable thing.
Yeah, absolutely. It's a very natural thing and difficult, can be very difficult to do, especially for anybody who feels like they connect with imposter syndrome or have occasional or frequent feelings of it. And, what I would say to that is start off small, right? Which is first with this book is only for you, right? Nobody else has to read it.
Yeah.
And maybe even if you don't feel comfortable asking people around you about your accomplishments or achievements or what do you think I do really well, there probably is one or two people you trust enough that you could do that eventually with, but just start off with making your own notes, right? Every time you hear someone make a comment or say
Mhm.
something, or that expression you see in a patient's face when you've just opened up something for them, right? That they didn't realize in themselves. Or you could see like a major behavioral change that now is making their health better for themselves or something you've uncovered that they didn't know. I mean, any of those things, right?
Right.
Document it, write it down. And then as you get more comfortable, you can ask around. And then as you get even more comfortable, you can reframe it in this perspective, which is your voice needs to be heard. You are a leader. And so every time you refrain yourself from getting that voice out and showcasing to others all the great work you're doing, you're actually inhibiting the organization from valuable information that they could get from you. So people need to hear from you. They need to hear you. And the more confidence you showcase, real confidence. I don't like the term fake it till you make it. That's why I say give it time, dig into these strategies, or work with a coach like myself to accelerate some of these strategies. And because it's going to make the workplace and health outcomes and society and everything else a better place. Because as a physician, you are so impactful in people's lives. And so if you're not doing it for yourself because it's uncomfortable, think about it as you're doing it for others. And that's been a powerful reframe for me, right? That the more I can voice for other people that look like me, talk like me, or the more I can bring my ideas to the forefront. And so what? So what if they're not good? Or if someone doesn't agree with them, or someone thinks I'm stupid? It doesn't matter because most other people won't think that way. Or I will push forward in some ideas that are going to work.
Yeah.
And so yeah. So it's like sometimes thinking about how do you reframe around that humility, which is a different value, right? So it's like balancing out your values. Yes, you have this value of humility, but you also have this value of service, right? So how do you, sometimes you're going to have to lower the humility and increase the service.
So
This is how you do that.
yeah, no, that's awesome. I think that's an important mindset shift that we can do. Is there any quick tips that somebody can do on a day-to-day basis, like in their clinical encounters or if they're going into rooms, like if that internal imposter is creeping in, that you can think of, and even for trainees.
Yeah, absolutely. So, a couple of things. One is if you do your strengths assessment, look at your strengths every day, right?
Okay.
So, even having those top 5 running into your head is really good. A lot of resilience building strategies. I mean, again, I think meditation could be a whole other, or mindfulness practices could be a whole other episode. But often, if that voice is getting loud, you probably feel it somewhere in your body.
Yeah.
And if you're feeling it somewhere in your body, elevated heart rate, maybe pain in your stomach, in your head, whatnot, mindfulness practices can help you a lot with that. And so even if you're doing a 2-minute breathing technique or
Mhm.
even just stilling your mind for 2 minutes and looking out the window, you're disrupting that voice in your head. You're disrupting that pattern
Yeah.
because you're focused on something else just for 2 minutes. It's a quick, easy fix. I've done it in meetings too, where I've checked out and I'm holding on to my wrist or I'm holding on to a rubber band just to make myself more present. And
Yeah.
just holding that presence helps me get out of the anxiety of what if or what could happen,
Yeah.
right? Because a lot of that imposter is around fear and anxiety, and that's the what if. And so
Yeah.
you want to switch that to what is and put yourself in a state of what is. What
What
is next?
is? Okay. I love that. Yeah. What if? What is? I love that.
What, yeah, switching that what if to what is.
um, in your work as in healthcare administration and executive roles, what do you think institutions understood better or did better? I always like to ask that question, to about this particular phenomena or about, burnout in general and healthcare professionals that you see.
Yeah. I would say, yeah, our physicians need a lot more support. So whatever we can do to reduce the administrative burden of physicians and get them to do what they're best at
Yeah.
is going to be huge for
Yeah.
environments of healthcare, and it's going to help the healthcare teams all around because burnt out physicians or physicians headed to a road of burnout are probably leading to environments that are creating burnout for others too, right?
Mhm.
And are creating behaviors inadvertently, unintentionally that are negatively impacting the environments all around. So getting to the heart of why are our physicians still working these crazy work hours? Like what is really going on? Would be something that I spent a lot of time in my career as an executive leader working through and working on. The second is really enlisting a lot of help of coaching, a lot of coaching programs to bring in conversations around this. Sending leaders to get trained in coaching so that it becomes part of their leadership style, or of course, getting the support of coaches and not looking at it as something remedial in nature, but looking at it as developmental and adding to their learning. Yeah, I would say those are the big two things.
One thing that you said earlier kind of stuck with me, how healthcare people in healthcare are portrayed so differently. You use the term narcissist, but they look so different, they're internally so different. Can you think of something? I'm just brainstorming here of how we can change that image. Like I'm just thinking about it now, and that's such a common thing. Um, and yeah, you may not have the answer, but
Well, I would say you're doing it by getting a great podcast like this. I would love to see more physicians get on the airwaves to talk about these vulnerable topics,
Yeah.
right? I think it's so important and for more and more physicians to advocate about their environments and what's happening, and for more physicians to get into administrative leadership roles,
Yeah.
however they can, whether it's further study, whether it's coaching, whether it's self-learning, whether it's getting involved in a little bit more administrative responsibilities than they want to, but more committee leadership type to get noticed for great ideas and advancing so that they can have more of a voice
Yeah.
in bringing attention to the challenges that the environments have. So,
Yeah. That's awesome.
is there anything that you wanted to say and you haven't said today, or any story, of that was really impactful for you, of a client or somebody who you transformed, before we go to our end?
yeah, sometimes people who come to me don't even know it's imposter syndrome. So I remember a physician client who came to me and said, I work in a toxic environment and I need to get out of it. Will you help me transition out? I'm like, sure. So we started the coaching engagement. And as we started digging deeper using the different tools and techniques, we found not only was it imposter syndrome, but what she was seeing as a toxic environment was really a toxic colleague. And so as we started working through the imposter syndrome and the confidence building, it helped her reframe and relook at her environment and help her see her own power to help change the environment or look at it in a different way. And then because of that, she felt more empowered on how to deal with the toxic colleague.
Mhm.
And it was transformational for her. I mean, it was a 6-month engagement. Most of my clients work with me for 6 months to a year. But in 6 months, I mean, even in 5 months, she was ready. She was ready to transition over to taking what she had learned through our coaching and applying it herself. And 2 years later, she's flying. She's really flourishing.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much, Aashi, for doing this with us today. I think it was really, really good and useful and so much self-reflection I did as we were talking. So I'm sure the listeners will be reflecting as well, just listening to some of the great things that you've said and, look into coaching as well, because I think it's a very useful tool. There is a tradition on this podcast. Before we close, we ended with a poem. So if you'll stay with me for that.
Yeah, of course.
I want to share this poem. It feels especially meaningful for anyone working through self-doubt, perfectionism, or the quiet weight of, never feeling enough. And in medicine, we're taught to hold on to knowledge, to control, to composure. But, healing often begins when we choose to loosen our grip a little bit. So the poem is She Let Go by Saphir Rose. She let go. She let go without a thought or a word. She let go. She let go of the fear. She let go of the judgments. She let go of the confluence of opinions swarming around her head. She let go of the committee of indecision within her. She let go of all the right reasons wholly and completely, without hesitation or worry. She just let go. She didn't ask anyone for advice. She didn't read a book on how to let go. She didn't search the scriptures. She just let go. She let go of all the memories that held her back. She let go of all the anxiety that kept her from moving forward. She let go of all the planning and all of the calculations about how to do it just right. She didn't promise to let go. She didn't journal about it. She didn't write the projected date in her day timer. She made no public announcement and put no ad in the paper. She didn't check the weather report or read her daily horoscope. She just let go. She didn't analyze whether she should let go. She didn't call her friends to discuss the matter. She didn't do a 5-step spiritual mind treatment. She didn't call the prayer line. She didn't utter one word. She just let go. No one was around when it happened. There was no applause or congratulations. No one thanked her or praised her. No one noticed a thing. Like a leaf falling from a tree, she just let go. There was no effort. There was no struggle. It wasn't good and it wasn't bad. It was what it was, and it's just that. In the space of letting go, she let it all be. A small smile came over her face. A light breeze blew through her, and the sun and the moon shone forevermore. Thank you so much, Aashi, for doing this with us today.
Beautiful. Yeah, that was a beautiful poem.
Thank you.